There's an alarming reason why 1 in 10 menopausal women are leaving their jobs, meaning hundreds of UK organisations are losing incredible talent each year. As you may have guessed it's not because women are simply seeking higher salaries, that's a discussion for another time, or a change of environment and leadership. It's because of an embarrassing lack of knowledge and understanding about menopause with employers. According to a survey of results published on the Fawcett Society website, 80% of women say their employer hasn't shared information, trained staff, or put in place a menopause absence policy. It's obvious there's a serious issue here. Employers not only aren't supporting women during menopause, they're not even talking about it. So what a great opportunity to discuss this with today's expert guest. Lauren Chiren describes herself as a no-nonsense speaker, trainer, and health and business coach who helps people achieve their desires and goals and dreams, while importantly helping businesses maintain the bottom line by retaining their top talent. An inspirational woman and former senior executive in financial services, she's an experienced global keynote speaker, podcast host, CEO, and founder of Women of a Certain Stage. Lauren sits with me today to discuss how her own menopause in the corporate environment led her to completely reinvent her approach to creating others' success. Welcome, Lauren. I am so excited to speak to you today. I've been stalking and following you on LinkedIn for a while now, so I'm really pleased that we're actually getting to chat. Welcome. How are you?
Yeah, no, really good. Thank you. Lovely to be here and nice to see you. And yeah, really excited to see where this conversation goes today.
We start each pod to try and get a little insight into our guests to ask them about their morning routine. Do you have anything in particular that you do to set your day up in the morning?
Yeah, it's one of the key things I work with all my clients on, and also the coaches that I train, making sure that they've got good routines so that they can then instill that with their clients as well. So for me, it's anchoring that wake up time is the very first and most important thing, making sure that you're getting up at the same time pretty much every day, 7 days a week. And our bodies need that rhythm, especially when we're going through menopause. So for me, it's a glass of water. It's just thinking through the day ahead. Journaling out, I do a mindset dump. So I do a brain exercise in the morning just for 3 or 4 minutes. I write down all the thoughts in my head and then unscramble them, put them in priority, decide what I'm focusing on the day ahead. Typically drop my son at school by 7:30, and then it's exercise, come back, breakfast, and then I'm ready to start the day at 10 o'clock. So I don't start work before 10 typically.
That's perfect. What exercise do you do in the morning out of interest?
It depends. It varies. All sorts of different things. So I've got a gym. I'm a former PT, so I've got a gym in the garden. I've got a rowing machine and a bike, and I've got a full set of weights and a rack and battle ropes and kettlebells. We imagine it, I've got it. So a combination of weights and hits and cardio and everything, a bit of flexibility. I'm trying to get better at doing some yoga or some form of stretching, and just every day trying to get 20 to 30 minutes in so that, we fight against the natural decline as we get that bit older.
Perfect. Now, getting stuck straight in today, it's reported that 8 out of 10 women say their employer hasn't shared any information, trained staff, or put in place a menopause absence policy. Why do you think this is, and what can we do about it?
I think the first thing is really just to recognise that the workplace that we live in currently was designed for men by men, and women were not part of that equation in any mass numbers over the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years. So now that we're working longer and later into life, we need to think about what is that workplace set up like? What's our built environment like? What's the entire employee journey from job design through exit? What does that all look like? And how can we accommodate everybody? When I first started working in this space, going back 2014, it was very much just, educating people in menopause and getting a menopause policy in place. But a lot of the companies have evolved a lot further than that now. And if organizations are really serious about having representation of people who go through menopause all the way through their organization, they have to make some significant cultural changes and think more smartly about their policies and procedures. So it's just really working with organizations and looking at that strategy, looking at what are their business goals, what is it that they need to adapt, how can they incorporate menopause into existing policies and procedures rather than reinventing the wheel. Because for me, my business isn't just about menopause, it's about everything from menstruation to menopause. And that's because I had no clue. When I went through my experience, I thought menopause was for older women. I thought it was like period stopping, hot flushes, and a bit of a moody person that sat at home. I had no clue that menopause was something our transgender, non-binary, gender questioning community would go through, that many, many people will be in perimenopause from their late 30s. And actually, we've just completely ignorant of it. The generation coming up to and going through menopause right now weren't educated at school, pretty much haven't had those conversations with a mother or some other female relative. Our doctors typically aren't trained in it. So if we don't learn at work, there's not anywhere else that this generation is actually going to learn about it. So yeah, I think it's just recognizing there's just been a bit of a gap in our education, sorting that out, and then making sure the people around us feel really comfortable talking about menopause and supporting people going through it. And whether or not people have policies or absence procedures, that's really down to the culture of an organization, because sometimes having an overarching wellbeing policy could be more effective, and other times it's about having a flag in your HR system for menstruation or menopause. So I think it is about working with every organization individually and making sure that we land something that is a really good fit for them, that's going to be effective and bring people along on the journey as well.
Even just opening the conversation, I think, is helpful, isn't it? So that people are aware more than anything else, even if we don't have a policy in place. If we rewind a little and talk about your story and your journey, because I think that's really interesting.
Which bit? The bit where I will go through menopause and I think of it early onset dementia.
And I say it's interesting because it's very similar to mine. That's why.
Yeah, I mean, we've all got a story, right? We've all got a story, whether it's menopause or something else. And for me, I was really fortunate. I've had a number of career changes. I've gone from working, graduating in psychology, working in corporate, in operations, retraining as a personal trainer, sports therapist, nutritional advisor, working all over the world doing that. Coming back into corporate in financial services, leading transformation programs, with teams in India and America and the UK. Absolutely loving my work and loving the complexity of the regulatory and compliance change, and breaking that all down into bite-sized chunks for people to deliver on time, cost, quality. And, that was what I really enjoyed doing. And then I just had about 18 months where, frankly, I would sit in meetings and I'd have to have like little sips of water all the way through the meetings because I couldn't squeak out any words because I was so anxious. My throat would literally shut and I couldn't quite it was like that, trying to get words out. And that was when I could remember the words I wanted to say. Or one particular presentation in front of the board that I'd worked on a program for about 9 or 10 months, and the business case was rock solid. I knew everyone involved in the piece of work. And I just had complete jitters before going into that meeting. But I don't mean jitters as in I'm a bit nervous. Jitters as in floods of tears. I can't do this. I can't take this forward. And yet there was no one that knew more about it than me. When I look back, I'm like, how on earth did that happen? Or the night I came back from work and said hi to my nanny, hi to my son, turned around, picked up my bags and went to go back to work, forgetting I'd been in work. So, I was in my early 40s and I'm a sole parent, a child with lifelong medical needs. Nothing had ever been too much for me. I'd always kind of, whatever came along in life, I'd just find a way through. But on this particular occasion, I thought I had early onset dementia and I left my job because I didn't want to be seen as weak or vulnerable.
But it's such a sad but also familiar story. That's the thing about it, is I thought I was getting on early onset dementia as well. That's all I was Googling all the time. And it was because of the lack of being able to get words. I could get a sort of single syllable or two syllable word, but anything more than that just seemed to escape me. It was absolutely bizarre. And I think it's funny that this lack of confidence happens at this life stage as well. And even talking about that more, I think is really helpful, because we talk, or the movies talk a lot about all the hot flushes and some of the other symptoms. And actually, when we're talking about corporate life, a lack of confidence in your ability is just so important to talk about, because, as you said, you were probably at the pinnacle of your corporate career. There was nobody more capable than you, and yet you doubted yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, that when menopause comes along for the majority of us, that we are typically at the most senior role we've held. So we're normally thriving. We're normally juggling family life, whatever family life is, because for all of us, that's really different these days. And typically, we might still have responsibility for children or adult children. We might be looking after elderly relatives. We're looking after, the job. But what we don't have is that time for ourselves. And that's why I don't start work till 10 o'clock now. And equally, we don't have community. So many of us have moved, miles away from our family, and we are so busy working and looking after the family that we don't have those circles and networks around us. So we don't have the support mechanisms. So we can't outsource something if we're not in a position to pay for childcare or pay for home help or whatever it is that you need to be able to do the day job. You're run ragged. And by the time the weekend comes, you just go, I'm done. I'm out of here, because, and then people start, what I tend to find a lot of people start to, when they stop looking after themselves, then that's where the bad habits creep in. The food isn't as good. The caffeine and the alcohol creeps up. The hydration levels go down. The movement and the exercise disappears. And all of a sudden people wonder why their stress levels have gone up and their symptoms are worse. And it's all interconnected. So yeah, it's a really bizarre time of life. And that loss of self-esteem and self-confidence can really be very critical for people.
So you went from a point where you'd lost all your confidence, you left your job, and then what led you to then start up Women of a Certain Stage?
So I sat in my doctor's surgery. I'd gone back, my third appointment with him, and I'd gone back to see him to get the results of some blood tests, fully expecting him to turn around and say to me, I had so many months or weeks left before someone else would have to take over making decisions for me. And I thought I was going to be given, the amount of time I had left to find someone to look after my son and bring him up, for me to find a home to be looked after, rocking in the corner somewhere. And he turned around and he goes, to be sure, Lauren, you've just been through the menopause. And I was like, yes, I was the happiest menopausal woman in England. And that was it. And I just remember going from being a gibbering wreck, shaking, crying, rocking on the chair, and he'd give me the tissues. Normally I go through half a box of tissues every time I saw him. And I just looked him straight in the eye and I went, I have to speak to employers. I have to let them know about this thing called menopause. I need to go and find out about it. I need to stop anyone else from leaving their job thinking they've got early onset dementia. And I was just like, I was on a monologue. And he just looked at me and goes, you've got to look after yourself first.
So you'd actually been through menopause at that point?
Yeah, I'd left my job.
No, but you'd been through menopause. You weren't just perimenopausal at this point.
No, I was postmenopausal by probably 5 years by then. So basically what we think happened was I had my son at 37. I fed him for a year. Then I was on contraception that meant I didn't have a period. So I had no way to know my periods had stopped. But when we tracked back the symptoms, we reckon I went straight from childbirth into menopause. So I've either had a premature menopause or an early menopause, either which way. I don't know exactly when, but the chances are that I went straight from having my son into menopause, which would make sense when you think about your adrenals and your cortisol levels and the stress. There's a load more behind that, but it was a very stressful period because I'd been offered termination of my son at 6 months pregnant. My partner had left and I was kind of trying to juggle my business and everything and trying to decide whether to keep the pregnancy or not. So it kind of makes sense when you look back at it, but no one tells you that these things can be connected. And there's a lot more research that still needs to be done. So we'll see.
Wow, gosh. And Women of a Certain Stage, tell us about the business and what you do.
So it started out, it was never intended to be a business. I imagined I'd go back into contracting, doing project and program management again. But I was so curious about why I hadn't known about menopause. I'm fairly well read, and I was, I'm a former personal trainer and nutritional advisor. I was like, I've got, mental health and psychology, all of these things I'm qualified in, and yet I didn't have a clue. So I thought, if I didn't know, then what chance have my friends got or other people? So I started chatting to people and I started setting up menopause socials. And I encourage everyone to do this, is just get together in your local community with other people that are experiencing symptoms, go somewhere for a walk or for a cuppa, just get a group of people together that are going through this and share your experiences, share what's working, share what's going well for you, share where the doctors that are helpful are, the lifestyle choices and changes, the complementary treatments you find that have worked, and support each other through this, because we're missing that community. So I actively encourage everyone all across the world to set up a menopause social. Have it be somewhere where no one's coming along to sell you anything. There's no pressure. It's just a safe space for people going through menopause to come together. And as it was building up here in Bristol, and the first Sunday of every month we would get together, I connected with the local charity. They provided, hot drinks and snacks. And then together we did the advertising. So that helped me get more of a reach. The local radio station got hold of it. And then before I knew it, I had teamed up with a former organisation that I'd worked with, who's a national bank. And a couple of us got chatting, and some of the girls were going, "Oh, I'm beginning to experience that." I said, "Have you heard of perimenopause?" And like, "No, what's perimenopause?" So I explained to them it was the stage leading up to menopause and talked about the symptoms. They're going, "Ah, I think that's what I've got." And then everyone's like, "Oh, I've got that too." like, yeah, that's really, really affecting my sleep and my confidence, just like you were saying. And we said, right, we've got to do something about this. So we put on an event in the city in London. It was oversubscribed. This is a few years ago now. And that was where Women of a Certain Stage was born. And it's called Stage because you could have a surgical or medical intervention at a much younger age. You might have premature menopause like me, or early menopause in between 40 and 45. And also what I realized was that millions of women out there are suffering with endometriosis and fibroids and all of these other menstrual challenges and fertility issues and miscarriage. So I wanted to create something that would educate organizations on educating their people how to look out for signs and symptoms and stop people from suffering, 10 years or more before they get help and support with all these different conditions, and start to give people who go through all of these things an opportunity not to be dragged back by them, not to have to put a corporate mask on, so that they can just continue to. Can you imagine what we could all do if we didn't have to worry about monthly pain or menopausal symptoms? Can you imagine? I mean, that's a world that I aspire to, and that's what Women of the Certain Stage is all about. So we train menopause coaches, we train menopause champions, we work with organisations to become menopause, menstruation savvy, and we work globally, and it's just fun. It's just really great being able to help people wrap their heads around this and just feel comfortable and confident talking about it.
I think your passion shines through, which probably makes your event so well attended and so great. Is it mainly HR teams that you deal with, or do you deal with everybody within the organisation?
Everybody. And what's great this year, we did more Menopause for Men sessions than any other year. We've delivered in 14 different languages this year, including American, Indian and British Sign Language. It's just phenomenal. I've got my first cohort of coaches. So I'm training 16 coaches, including a man. And he's left a very senior financial services career because of what menopause nearly did to his marriage. And he recognizes that, by supporting husbands and wives going through this journey together, that he's going to help people really enrich their lives.
That's actually really powerful, having a man as a menopause coach. That is a really powerful message. When you deliver to men, do they get it? Do they understand? Do they come along to your sessions because they think this might be an issue already affecting them?
Yeah, it's a real mixture. So I did a talk before the pandemic, so it was an in-person talk, and I had this young couple walk out of the talk, burst into tears. I was like, oh my gosh, what have I said? But at the end of it, they came back to speak to me, and it turns out they weren't the couple. They were 22-year-old twins. And they had left home at 15 thinking their mother hated them. So they'd gone out during my talk to pick up the phone to her and make connection for the first time in 7 years. So I will get younger men coming along because they're witnessing their mother going through it. I'll get husbands coming along. I live in the north of Bristol near lots of aerospace. So lots of, heavy manufacturing, lots of, male-dominated industry here. And a lot of the time we'll do lunch and learns. So we'll be sat around a table. And I had one chap turn around to me and he goes, "Oh, right. I don't have to divorce this one then." I was like, "I'm sorry?" And he goes, "Well, she's gone off. I come home from work at night. She doesn't want it anymore." I was like, "I'm sorry?" He goes, "Well, now I know what's going on with her. I can help her fix it." I was like, we don't want fixing. Anyway, he basically had divorced his first wife because, unbeknownst to him or her, menopause had come along. It turns out we've kept in touch over the last few years, and it turns out, because he's got back in touch with her, she had vaginal dryness, vaginal atrophy, had really struggled with any form of intimacy. That had destroyed their relationship. He'd remarried, and then the next wife was coming up to that phase of life and was beginning to experience same challenges. So we've managed to, help herself, get the right support for her. Their marriage is finally writes to me every year on the anniversary of that session that I did with them. But typically men will just say things like, "I just feel so relieved to understand it now. I can help, or I think this has saved my marriage. So I think the amount menopause has been in the media, podcasts like this is just so powerful to help reach people and let people know that this is something we all need to understand, because you're either going to go through it or you're going to support somebody or live, work, or socialize with somebody going through it. So we've all got to get our heads around it.
That's such a powerful story. I don't know if you saw, but I actually got a bit teary about those twins leaving your session, because I think there is I know that a lot of women experience rage that they think is unexplained rage, or they identify it as their hormones, and it is, I mean, it can be crazy rage that makes you throw things or do stuff. I've read about stories about that in the press, and it's just so bad. And then I know that you've spoken recently about the stats around the number of women that divorce at this age and stage and leave their jobs. Do you want to just tell us those stats just now, because it's incredible?
Yeah, I mean, we know there's been a number of studies done now that show that there's a spike in women, and I say women deliberately because these pieces of analysis have been done on women, on the female population. So there's a spike in women leaving work, 45 to 55. There's a spike in divorce, age 45 to 55, and there's a spike in women attempting to and taking their own life, 45 to 49. So this is something we absolutely have to wrap our heads around. And, you know, I was on the severe end of the symptoms scale looking back. And there were days where, frankly, I could have just drawn a line under everything. And, you know, sadly, I know too many husbands who have lost their wives and have been in touch with me after the event to see what they can do. But we need to get smarter about this. We need to get our doctors educated, and, you know, come in the UK in 24-25, the medical student cohort intake will start to be routinely trained in women's health. But for GPs, that means it'll be 30, 34, 35 before all our doctors are routinely trained in women's health. And that's scary in this day and age. So hopefully there'll be other interventions. That
the stats at the moment are something, I'm not going to say it exactly right, but it's something ridiculous. Like, it's half a morning that they get on menopause if they actually attend that lecture at the moment within their training, which I understand. I mean, GPs have a lot to cover. I understand that, but it is such an important issue. And I think that's why, like, as you were saying, the celebrities that are now talking about it, I think has really helped. And it's certainly opened up the conversation within my friendship group, because I'm maybe a few years behind you. And when I first started having my perimenopause symptoms, nobody was talking about it. There was no way. And then Davina McCall started talking about it. And then we all sort of seemed to have this release that we were allowed to talk about it, which is so amazing. And that's why I'm so excited to share lots of different women's stories, because I think there's always something in the story that I learn. What do you advocate that we can do to support our own minds and bodies? I know you talk to employers a lot, but what about individual women? I think your routine has been very important, but what else do you do?
So over the course of the last few years, I've developed something called the Menopause Plan. And this is just a structure that I invite people to go through. So I don't, I'm not selling anything or anything like that, but it's important for people to learn. So the first thing is about building their knowledge, understand what's actually going on in your body, what's happening through estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, learn the interactions between those hormones and serotonin and oxytocin, understand the impacts on your blood sugar levels, your insulin and your cortisol, actually get your head around what is physically changing in your body. With that knowledge, it then becomes a lot easier to start making decisions around your mindset and embracing it, welcoming it, seeing it as a badge of honor, stepping into that next phase of your life where you don't have to worry about monthly cycles. You can wear what you want. There's so much to do with mindset. Look back and recognize how much you have achieved in your life while you've had all those other hormonal shifts and changes, and then think about what you're going to be able to do when you don't have to worry about that anymore. So the mindset, the knowledge, and then the next thing is boosting hydration. So if you think about hot sweats, just think about how you feel when you don't hydrate well, when you've had too much alcohol, you're drinking too much caffeine, the headaches, the bloatingness, the lack of bowel movement. All of these things make us feel sluggish and moody and impact our ability to concentrate. So get your hydration sorted. And then it's just running through all the other things as well. So, it's your movement, it's your relationships, it's decluttering the stuff that doesn't serve you in life. It's your morning and evening routines. It's, having purpose. And then there's a whole series of stuff that we go through with nutrition as well. So we have a big piece on nutrition, not prescriptive because everyone's needs are different, but just getting people to the point of understanding what the impact of eating processed foods and sugars and, making sure they're getting lots of healthy fats in their diet, understanding that, full fat is probably better for you at this time of life. And, realizing that you need lots of protein in your diet, every meal if possible, lots of vegetables. But there's a process that I'll take people through to kind of learn what's right for them. Because I don't think, I look at some of the people out there that sell X, Y, or Z diet, and I'm like, that might work for some people, but nothing works for everybody, because if it did, we wouldn't have this problem. So I think it's about empowering people to understand what's going to work for them. What sort of mindset do they want to embrace? How do they want to hydrate? How do they want to move their body? How are they going to embrace, the best possible eating, coming into cost of living crises at the time of recording this? How can we make sure that we prioritize the money we're spending on food and the best possible foods for us? And, just giving conscious thought to those types of things. Looking at supplements, looking at complementary therapies, looking at, there's so many different things that we can look at. But the most, good night's sleep, obviously sleep is elusive during menopause, but when you put all these things into place, then that can help you anchor a better night's sleep as well. And don't do this alone. In the UK, there's 13.5 million women that are menopausal. In the US, over 55 million. You're not alone. You're very definitely not alone. So make sure you do team up with somebody and you've got a buddy, a menopause buddy, to go through this journey, or set up a menopause social and have people around you that can lean on, who you can support as well, because you're not alone. And that sense of isolation, I think, certainly the women I work with feel quite isolated. They're so busy, they don't have that support around them. And I think often we really forget our self-care. We really forget to look after ourselves and put ourselves first. So when you've got a buddy there to check in with you, that little bit of accountability, I think that helps.
It's a bit like having a training buddy, isn't it? If you want to do exercise, you make yourself a bit more accountable if you go with somebody else. And it's probably the same as going through the menopause journey. I love that you're bringing in sort of all aspects of your previous personal life. So it's not just the corporate world, it's also the PT and the health and nutrition, and you're doing that to build a whole plan. And I think that's so important when we're approaching menopause or post-menopause, to have this whole plan in place for your life rather than just a single thing. Now, I always like to ask about opinions on HRT, because it's had such a bad press in the past, and if you have any opinions that you'd like to share.
Yeah, so I have done lots of medical training on HRT, but I'm not a medic, so I can't really, definitely cannot give any advice, and, never would. But it's something I advise people to read up on. It's something I advise people to go and talk to a doctor about and find out what the options are. There are so many different types of HRT available now than there were when the WHO report was written, WHI report was written 20 years ago now. So it's about, what you've got to recognise is that because of the negative press and because of what was in the media so much 20 years ago, we've got doctors that will not or haven't gotten up to date with HRT, and we've got doctors that are very happy to prescribe. We've got areas of the country where you can get testosterone and areas of the country where you can't. So there's a lot of difference in the medical opinion. I work with consultants who are very pro and are very not pro HRT. So my thoughts around it are: understand what you can do for yourself, what's within your power, what's within your control, and then speak to your doctor and have that conversation with them. But go into your doctor prepared with your symptoms list, with your questions, tell them what it is you want to talk about. Be prepared for a couple of appointments as well. And, just find out what the art of the possible is, and then make your decision. There's lots of good research coming out showing that whether or not you've got symptoms, whether you're symptomatic or not, that there's a lot of brain, bone and heart health benefits from being in HRT for life. There's other research that suggests the exact opposite. So it's a really tricky one. I think you have to just do your homework and make a decision from a place of informed choice.
Yeah, I think there's so much information out there now as well. And as you say, going to your GP with the symptom checker, I think, is very helpful. And there's lots of them available online now, which is great. And there's so many symptoms to choose from too, which is helpful for GPs to have them identified. And now you're focused globally now, not just in the UK with your business?
Yeah. I think I spoke to 51 countries during October.
During October?
Well, in October, because in October I don't travel. So because World Menopause Day, I was, pretty fully booked, and in all the sessions we did in October, we figured that we went out to about 51 countries. 51 countries confirmed anyway, including Ukraine.
That's incredible when you think what they're going through, that they could even, wow, that's so incredible. Well, I've absolutely loved chatting with you today, Lauren, and I've learned so much. And it's really great to hear the work that you're doing and that you're reaching so many women in such a positive manner. So thank you for sharing your story with us and for sharing your expertise today. And Lauren, how can our listeners find you on social media or on the internet? Do you have a website?
I do have a website, womenofacertainstage.com, and Instagram is at the Menopause Coach. And where you're going to see most of me is actually on LinkedIn, and that's where you'll often see me talking about my free Menopause the Basics course, which is 3 half-hour sessions every 2 months, and it's free education, knowledge, updated information from all around the world that I just want to make sure that nobody ever is in want or need of information on menopause. So that just takes them through the facts, the basics, how to help themselves and others, and helps them find additional signposting for themselves going forward.
And wonderful that it's free. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Marvin.